Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier Online. Welcome to our live session this morning. Today we're going to be just making a basic pound cake, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be marbling the chocolate into the pound cake. I'm going to show you this technique. And the pound cake is something that's been around for a long time. It's very simple. I'm thinking that maybe some of you have already made this. So with the pound cake, the ingredients and the weights of the ingredients lend themselves to the name. So it's originally made with 1 pound of butter, 1 pound of sugar, 1 pound of flour, and 1 pound of eggs by weight. And there's typically not a leavener in it, and it doesn't rise or grow a real lot. It just it rises and fluffs up a little bit. It is a little bit dense, and it can have a little bit of a crumbly texture. So this is the original pound cake, and this is how it got its name. So knowing that, let's talk about some additions to the pound cake. So as time goes on, things change. So you can add additions to your pound cake. You can add a lot of different flavors. You can add some nuts. You can add chocolate chips. You can add raisins. And you can also add things that are going to change the characteristic of the bread. So today we're not going to be making a basic 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 ratio pound cake. We're going to change it up a little bit. So I've got my sugar, and I've got my flour, and these are the same weights. I got my whole eggs, and I'm going to be adding sour cream to the mixture, and I'm also going to be adding a little bit of baking soda, not too much. The sour cream is going to add to the flavor. It's going to give it a little bit more of a creamier, sour flavor. We're going to have our butter too, which is also going to give that a little bit of a creamy flavor, soften the pound cake a little bit. And the baking soda is going to help it rise a little bit. So knowing all that, let's get started. So basically for pound cake, what you do is you cream your butter and your sugar. And you're going to make this nice and fluffy. And typically if you're making a traditional pound cake with the ratio of the 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 with the 1 pound of each ingredient, the air that you're incorporating into the butter and sugar, that's going to work as a leavener along with the eggs. So it's just fine not having a leavener in it. I just chose this recipe because it's one of my favorite recipes, and I like the flavor adding the sour cream. The sour cream has the acidity in it, which is going to help activate that baking soda a little bit. The baking soda is going to help give it a little bit more of a darker brown crust, and it's just going to add a little bit more of a lightness to the pound cake. So once we have our base, we're going to be mixing in our chocolate. So that's the fun part. So let's go ahead and cream this for a little bit longer, and then we'll go ahead and add our eggs. And does anyone have any questions or maybe any thoughts on the pound cake? Okay, so you're going to let a little bit of air get in here. Since there's a lot of sugar and not a real lot of fat, it's not going to cream the same as it would if it were maybe a chocolate chip cookie dough, where you're going to see the sides of the paddle around the bowl. We're going to let this go for a little bit, and you can add some flavors to this. You can add some different extracts. Vanilla is nice. Vanilla being super nice flavor with the pound cake, even if you're doing the marble or if you're doing just a traditional vanilla. Lemon is nice as well. Orange, or pretty much any of the extracts. Okay, so we have a question.
About how many eggs are you using in this?
I didn't hear the...
How many?
I'm using 6 eggs in the mixture, and one of the most important things when you're making this marble pound cake is that all of your ingredients are at room temperature. So my eggs are at room temperature, I've got my sour cream at room temperature, I started my butter at room temperature. Because we're going to be mixing chocolate into this. If this is cold at all, the chocolate is going to seize. Okay, so knowing this, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our eggs, and then we're going to be adding our sour cream and our dry ingredients last. So what you can do is leave your eggs sit out If you've forgotten, you're ready to go, your eggs are still cold, you can go ahead and put them in a bowl of warm water, shell and all, and just leave them sitting there, and they can kind of work on their own a little bit, warming up to room temperature. Some chefs will also put their sugar in the oven on a sheet pan momentarily to help warm that up a little bit if it's gotten cool at all. Like maybe if you were out and it's winter time, you went grocery shopping and your sugar was in the car and it got kind of cold. You can just spread it out on a sheet pan and put it in the oven for just a couple of minutes and you can feel it warm up. Okay, so this is looking great. It's going to be a little on the liquidy side. And then we're going to go ahead and add our sour cream. Scrape this down. We'll be ready to go. This is just a basic pound cake recipe. Like I said, you can make the super basic recipe without any leaveners in it, just using 1 pound of each of the ingredients, the sugar, the butter, the eggs, and the flour. And typically you're going to be using all-purpose flour. I've got my sour cream, and like I said, make sure this one is at room temperature too. You don't want any cooling because you will seize the chocolate once we start doing that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scrape things down, and as you can see, it's quick and it's easy. And this mixture, once you add the eggs and the sour cream, it's going to be a little bit almost fluid-like here. And this is just going to bring a lot of moisture and a lot of tenderness to the pound cake. So the variations on this are really limitless, and you can do a lot of different icings. You could do a fudge icing on top. You could do a lemon icing and maybe put some nuts on it, some sprinkles, some candies, really whatever you like. Once you learn the basics, then the variations are limitless. So we're going to go ahead and add our all-purpose flour.
I have a question. I'm wondering if you do the classic recipe with the 1-to-1, how many eggs would you put in? How would you know how many eggs to put in?
You're going to weigh them. It's 1 pound of each ingredient. Just just always remember pound cake. 1 pound of butter, 1 pound of sugar, 1 pound of flour, and 1 pound of eggs. Make sure that you're weighing those on your scale because, you know, some people have their own chickens, and we can have quite a few variations on sizes. But I definitely recommend trying it if you haven't made it before. You know, just something kind of old-fashioned, traditional from the beginning, you know. But please, please let me know if you try that and if you have any questions. And typically with the 1-to-1-to-1-to-1 ratio, you're using all-purpose flour. Okay, so this is pretty much it. So that was pretty fast and simple. And like I said, I've added some additions to the classic standard pound cake with the sour cream and the baking soda. And it's you know, it's just because it's a recipe that I like. It's something I like to use. It's a little bit lighter, and the crust browns up a little bit from the baking soda. If you remember when we made the soft pretzels and we put them in the baking soda bath to cook before we bake them, and that made the outside of the soft pretzel get very brown. So always remember that baking soda is going to help with a little bit of brownness on the outside. And we have another question. Oh, okay. The question was how much sour cream. In this recipe, I put 1 cup's worth. So what you can do too, if you want to experiment a little bit, you can substitute a little bit of the sour cream for some of the butter in that 1-to-1-to-1 ratio that we were talking about. So this is a pound cake. It looks great. It's just very basic. And I didn't put any flavorings in this because we're going to be marbling this with the chocolate. But like I said, you can use pretty much any extract in this, and also vanilla beans, super nice. It looks really beautiful with the pound cake, and icings on top are great too. I'm a fan of Chef Susie likes chocolate, obviously, and I'm a fan of putting some fudge on top. I just think it's a nice touch. Okay, so I'm just kind of scraping this down. Do we have another question?
Yeah, can you add lime to this?
Okay, I didn't. Yeah, we didn't. Okay, we didn't hear that very well. It was a little distorted, but if you could type in your question, that would be great.
I have a question about the eggs.
Okay.
When you're weighing them, if 7 is too many and 6 is not enough, so you have to take some out, do you mix them together first before you remove some?
Exactly. That's the perfect way to do that. So just, you don't want to whisk them and whisk any air in, but just break them up a little bit with a fork, and that's perfect. And through your baking, you're going to find that weighing your ingredients is going to be much more accurate. And eggs, it's a perfect example, especially if you have your own chickens, or who knows, like what size egg it really is, because they really vary. I mean, when you go to the grocery store, you'll see small, medium, large, and extra large, and from brand to brand, they vary. So one brand may consider one egg large, but another brand may consider it a medium egg. So I would definitely get in the habit of using weights instead of measures in your baking. You're going to find it's much more accurate, and the eggs are a perfect example of that. And especially if you have your own chickens someday, you won't be able to tell. You could ask the chicken, is this a small egg or a large egg? And so just much more accurate when you're weighing. So let's go ahead, and we're going to go ahead and make our marbling mixture. Okay, and we have another question. Oh, the question is can you add key lime zest to this? That would be such a nice addition. Key lime, super nice flavor. I would add the lime in with the sugar and the butter because there's some oil in the zest, and whenever I add lime or lemon zest, I try to get it to rub into the mixture a little bit to kind of release some more of those flavors. So I would put it in the very beginning. Super nice addition. You could make a lime glaze with just some lime juice and some powdered sugar. Put that on top, and then you could even take a microplaner and just zest a little bit of lime zest over that glaze for a nice finishing touch. But super nice. Lemon would work as well. Meyer lemons, if anyone's been using those, super nice flavor. So your basic pound cake you can do so much with. Okay, so I just have some semi-sweet dark chocolate that I melted here. And this is so important that these ingredients are at room temperature. Otherwise, if this were cold, if your sour cream and eggs were cold and you added it into this, it could seize. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put a little bit of our mixture in the chocolate, and we're going to go ahead and mix it together. And then this is what we're going to marble into the pound cake. So please let me know if you have any questions. And with the marbling, with my chocolate mixture, I like to make mine a little bit darker. I like a little bit more of a chocolate flavor, but you can pretty much, make it lighter or darker, however you want the flavor to be. So I mixed it up pretty good. And do we have any questions?
I do. I'm wondering about when we put it in the pans, are we able to use any type of pan to do it? Can we make it like a loaf or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, the pound cake is made in a loaf pan or a bundt pan, and really whatever pan you like. And today I'm going to be making the pound cake in a loaf pan. That's a traditional way to make it, or in a bundt pan. But you could even, if you wanted to do something different, you could make it in a round or even a deep fluted pan. So once you learn the technique and you learn how to make these breads, it's really limitless the shapes that you could make. You could make mini loaves, you could make larger ones. So definitely have fun with it. It is sturdy, it does hold up well. Okay, so now that I have my my chocolate mixture, and like I said, be sure that your original foundation pound cake mixture is at room temperature, otherwise you're going to seize this up. If the seizing happens, you can very carefully warm it on a double boiler. Don't walk away. Keep in mind there's some eggs in there, so you can bring it back if you're real careful with it. And you can go ahead and melt some of that chocolate that kind of clumped up in there. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to grab my pan that I prepared. Here's my pan. I had two pans. I wasn't sure which one. Okay, so I have an 8x4 pan. This recipe that I'm going to be giving you makes at least 2 8x4 pans. So you could even make a larger pan with this and a smaller pan. And what I always do with my pound cake or my banana bread or even my cupcakes or my muffins, I always fill the pan a little bit less than 3/4 of the way. I find 3/4 of the way is just a little too much, so I go a little bit less, and that's a standard that I use for all of my baking. So what we're going to do is I've got the pan and I sprayed it, and I always put a piece of parchment in the bottom to ensure there's no sticking with any loaves that I'm making or cakes, because it's just worry-free. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put some of this plain mixture in the bottom. Okay, so we're going to be layering, we're going to alternate a little bit to get that nice marble effect. So I've got a little bit of the plain mixture, and nextly I am going to add some of the chocolate mixture. So since I'm marbling, I'm just kind of using my same scoop here. So we're just going to alternate a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and marble this in. So we've got a nice layer of pound cake plain with chocolate, and then we're going to go ahead and finish it off with a little bit of plain and then a little bit more chocolate. And doing this layering is going to ensure that there is some nice marbling effect. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions. And we have another question.
With someone who has their chickens, sometimes he gets double yolks in the eggs. Does it matter about the whites to yolks?
Okay, so we had a question on double yolks in the eggs, and if we'll still have the same consistency or the same characteristics in our products with double yolks in the egg. So the double yolks are typically a little bit smaller. So you're fine if you have 1 or 2 of those, but if you happen to have a dozen, that could make a difference. So what I would do, if you have a lot of eggs that are double yolks, I would pull out a couple of the yolks before you kind of mix it together with your fork and go ahead and weigh it. But if you have a couple in there, it really won't make a big difference. Okay, so now we have our pound cake with our two flavors. We have our plain pound cake, and then we have our chocolate. So what we're going to do is take a knife, a little spatula, anything that you have that's not too big, and you're going to be swirling this, and this is what's going to make the marble effect. And I kind of go around. What you want to do, I'm kind of going to the bottom as well. Okay. So we have some nice contrast here with the dark and the light. What you're going to want to do is make sure that you stop swirling, because you can end up mixing these together or get a very light marble. And it's easy to do. You just kind of start swirling, and then all of a sudden it gets away from you. So make sure that you have some really nice contrast like this. It's going to look very random, and you really won't know what it looks like until you actually cut into it. But make sure that you're swirling with your spatula or spoon or whatever you're using all the way to the bottom, and just kind of go both ways a little bit, and then just let it go, and I can assure you you'll be really happy with it. So any questions on the marbling itself? Okay, good. So let's go ahead and take a look at some pound cake that I made earlier. Okay. So I wanted to give you a little bit of an example. So this is a pound cake that I baked earlier, and this is the same mixture that I made earlier as well. And I just wanted to show you, because in the 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 ratio pound cake, there isn't a leavener. And the eggs and the air that you're whipping into the butter are very instrumental in the leavening. So this is, what I did is I divided the mixture in half, but I cut back on the egg a little bit. So for the full mixture, instead of putting 6 eggs in, I only added 4, because I wanted to show you what effect the egg will really have on the pound cake and how it is so instrumental. So what I did is I baked this one, and then I took the rest of the mixture and I added 1 of the remaining eggs, because it was only half of the mixture, to bring it to the proper egg amount in the mixture. And you can see huge difference in the leavening. So even though we have a leavener in here, the eggs are really instrumental. So don't worry when you're making that 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 ratio. It's going to work, and it won't rise as much maybe as this one, because there won't be any baking soda in it, but it's definitely going to fluff up a little bit. So just be mindful of that. And even though this pound cake, you know, it didn't rise a lot, it had some sinking, it still looks good on the inside, as you can see, and it'll still be well received, because it is baked all the way through. The crust is a little thick because the sugar content is a little higher. So if your crust is very thick someday and seems a little sweeter, then you'll know that maybe you have a little bit too much sugar. So that's just a little tip on eggs and pound cake. So let's go ahead and we're going to cut open the pound cake that I made earlier. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking off the parchment, which is on the bottom. Sometimes it gets a little baked on there, and you kind of just have to start it off and peel it. But I always put this on the bottom of any cakes or pound cakes, any loaf cakes that I'm making. And this way I know there's no doubt it is going to come out of the pan. If you have to loosen the sides, that's okay, but the bottom will not stick with this on here. And also be mindful too, for your pound cake, that you're only leaving it cool part way in the pan. If you leave this cool all the way in the pan, it's going to become soggy. So what you're going to want to do is I let it cool a little bit more than halfway, and then I go ahead and I take it out, and I'll put it on a pan with a little parchment until it cools the rest of the way. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look and see how our marbling looks. Okay, so I like to trim off my edge a little bit. And as you can see, we've got some nice marbling in the pound cake, and it's going to be different every time. It's going to be very randomized. I had a little bit of a sinking here, but we definitely have some nice marbling. As you can see, that's a nice piece. So they're all going to be different, and this is just really marbling this chocolate flavor through the pound cake. So our pound cake looks super delicious. It smells great too. And please let me know if you have any questions, because we're getting ready to say goodbye. Okay, so we have a question.
I do. I'm wondering if you just use the recipe but don't put the chocolate in, would that be good for strawberry shortcake and that type of thing?
Yeah, it would be perfect. It's a nice, it's a heavier cake, so it's going to hold up really well. And someone that works here even stopped in when we were getting ready to start, and he was telling us that he saw a pound cake that was cut in 3 horizontally and made into an ice cream cake. So it's really limitless what you can do with these pound cakes. And keep in mind too, matcha powder, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It has some really great health benefits now. Some people are swirling in matcha powder, and what you would do is mix your matcha powder in a portion of the mixture the same way that you did with the chocolate, and you'll have a nice green swirling throughout, and you'll have something that's a little bit more healthful too.
How much would you think for the matcha powder?
How much matcha powder would you put in? Is that the question?
Yeah.
The matcha powder, I could probably send you an amount. I have a recipe for that. I could send it out, or we could even post it up. And the matcha powder, if you were doing a loaf about this big, I would say you would need at least a tablespoon of matcha powder. And I'm not sure if you've bought matcha powder before, but it is very expensive. So be careful when you're using it, but it has great health benefits and has a nice flavor to it too. And even though, you think about it's, the grinding of the whole leaf, you would think it would be more bitter, but it's not. And it's great when it bakes, and it looks super nice too. So we'll put up a link for that recipe for you guys so you have something a little bit different to work with.
Great.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions? I'm going to be putting our pound cake on a plate here. And we have another question. The question is how much baking soda did I use for this recipe? Not too much. It was a small amount because the pound cake is typically made without a leavener. And I used about 3/4 of a teaspoon, but we'll be posting the recipe for that as well. And keep in mind that baking soda needs something acidic to activate it. When you're using it in chocolate chip cookies, the molasses in the cookie is the acidity, which will help activate it. And in this pound cake, the sour cream is going to help activate that baking soda. So you're always going to want something acidic when using it. So I've got a plate that I've got ready. I just put some oranges, some blood oranges, some kiwi and raspberry. I piped a little chocolate on here. Chocolate is kind of fun to pipe on white plates. It's a nice contrast. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put a couple pieces of our super delicious looking marble pound cake on here. And it really smells so good. And I think that you're going to enjoy doing this. It's an easy technique. Like I said, the key to marbling chocolate in is to make sure that your mixture is at room temperature. So thanks for joining us today, and please message me if you have any questions, and we'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.